A billionaire threw his own baby off a bridge, and what happens next will leave you frozen in shock. You won't believe the reason behind this tragic act, and the incredible twist that changes everything. Satya. Watch till the end to see how the river reveals the truth. And don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you love stories full of suspense, tragedy, and unexpected redemption. The story begins under a golden African sun, the kind that makes the glass towers of Lagos shimmer like diamonds. From the balcony of his penthouse, Kwame Adisa looked down at the city he ruled. Every building, every road, every car that moved below, it all whispered his name. People called him the King of Steel, a self-made billionaire whose empire stretched from oil to technology. But that morning, even the gold light could not warm his heart. His reflection in the glass seemed to smirk at him, as if mocking the emptiness behind his success. For weeks, Kwame had been haunted by a voice he couldn't silence. It wasn't madness, at least that's what he told himself. The voice had come from a prophet woman, an old wanderer who had stopped him at a charity gala months ago. She had touched his arm, her eyes pale as dust, and whispered, "The one you love most will destroy all you've built." He had laughed then. But that night he dreamed of fire, his mansion burning, his company collapsing, and in every dream, he saw a small child standing in the flames, smiling at him. When his wife Amina told him she was pregnant, the world cheered. Magazines called it the heir of Africa's richest man. But Kwame's hands trembled when he touched her belly. He wanted to feel joy, he truly did, but fear crawled inside him like smoke. The prophecy had wrapped around his mind like chains. What if this was the one the prophet meant? What if the child he loved would be the one to ruin him? As months passed, his obsession grew. He filled the nursery with cameras. He asked doctors strange questions. Can a child be born evil? He once whispered to the pediatrician. Amina started to worry. She would wake in the night and see Kwame standing over the crib, staring, not blinking, as if watching a stranger. "He's just a baby," she said softly. But Kwame's eyes had changed. They were always searching, always doubting. The baby, Kito, was born under heavy rain. The night sky cracked with thunder as the city celebrated. Reporters outside the hospital shouted, "The prince is born!" But inside, when Kwame held his son for the first time, something dark rippled through him. Kito's tiny eyes opened, and for a second, a heartbeat long, Kwame swore he saw something old inside them. Something that knew him. The feeling made his chest tighten. He handed the baby back too quickly. Days turned into months. Kito laughed like sunshine, his smile melting hearts. But Kwame's unease deepened. Every time the boy giggled, Kwame heard echoes of the prophet's warning. He tried to bury himself in work, but at night, he would wake up drenched in sweat. He dreamed of bridges and rivers, of small hands slipping from his grasp. One evening, when Kito was barely a year old, Kwame took his family for a drive across the old Nile Bridge, the one that overlooked the river like a spine of stone. Amina sat beside him, humming to calm the baby. The sky turned crimson with sunset. For a moment it felt peaceful, too peaceful. Then, in the distance, Kwame saw the outline of a figure standing by the railing. His chest froze. It was the prophet woman. She didn't move. She didn't speak. But as they drove past her, Kwame's head throbbed. Her whisper echoed again inside him, louder, clearer than ever. "The one you love most will destroy you." His hands shook on the steering wheel. Sweat rolled down his neck. He stopped the car in the middle of the bridge, unable to breathe. Amina turned to him, frightened. "Kwame, what's wrong?" He didn't answer. He opened the door and stepped out, the wind cutting against his face. The world around him blurred. He heard the river roar beneath him, hungry and endless. Behind him, his son laughed, the same innocent giggle that had once made him smile. Now it sounded like thunder. He turned slowly, his heart pounding like war drums, his eyes locked on the baby in Amina's arms. And in that single, shattering instant, a vision struck him, clearer than daylight. He saw Kito grown up, standing in his office, signing documents that destroyed his empire. He saw flames licking the city skyline, people chanting the boy's name. He saw himself old, powerless, watching everything crumble. And then he saw himself, standing on this very bridge, his hands trembling, holding the child, the future and the present collided. The prophecy, the fear, the vision, everything became one blinding truth in his mind. Amina screamed as Kwame stepped forward, tears streaming down his face. "Kwame, what are you doing?" He whispered something only the wind could hear. And then, with shaking hands, he lifted his baby toward the river below. The world fell silent. The world slowed to a heartbeat. The sound of Amina's scream echoed across the bridge, sharp enough to tear through the wind. Kwame's fingers loosened. For one impossible moment, the baby seemed to hang in midair, small arms reaching, a flash of white blanket against the burning orange sunset. Then gravity took him. Kito fell. The cry vanished into the rush of the river below, swallowed by the thunder of water. The world went still. Even the sky seemed to hold its breath. Amina collapsed, her voice breaking into raw, wordless grief. She clawed at Kwame's chest, screaming, hitting, begging him to say it wasn't real. But Kwame stood frozen, as if his soul had left with the child. His lips trembled. His eyes fixed on the river, searching for something, redemption, a sign, anything. The silence pressed around him like punishment. When the police arrived, there was nothing to find. No body, no blanket, not even a ripple left in the river. The current had swallowed everything. The media devoured the story within hours. Africa's richest man loses mind, throws own child from bridge. His empire trembled. Investors fled. Friends vanished. The same world that once worshipped him now spat his name with disgust. In court, Kwame said only one thing. "I saw the future, and I chose the lesser evil." The judge called him insane. The public called him a monster. He was sentenced to years in a mental facility, far from the city that once bowed to him. But tragedy doesn't end when the world stops watching. Years passed. Kwame's empire broke apart piece by piece. His wife Amina left the country, her heart dead and her voice gone. The mansion grew silent. The name Adisa became a curse whispered in business halls. People forgot the man he was, except for the bridge. They called it the Billionaire's Bridge, a place haunted by guilt and wind. One rainy evening, almost a decade later, Kwame was released. His hair had turned gray, his hands thin and trembling. The world had moved on. Technology had changed. New billionaires had risen. But he returned to the city quietly, wearing only a dark coat, and the same guilt he'd carried for years. He walked back to the bridge, the same one that had witnessed his downfall. The rain poured, heavy and cold, washing over him as if trying to erase his sins. He leaned against the railing, staring into the churning water. "If there is a God in this river," he murmured, "then let me drown where my son fell." But the river answered differently. From the mist below, a soft humming rose. A woman's voice, old and cracked, yet strangely comforting. Kwame looked down. Through the rain and fog, he saw a figure moving along the riverbank. An old blind woman in tattered clothes, her hair silver, her skin glowing faintly in the moonlight. She was collecting something from the water, small candles that floated like lost souls. Kwame's breath caught. He shouted through the storm, "Who are you?" The woman didn't flinch. Her voice drifted upward like smoke. "The river remembers all it takes." Her words froze him. He stumbled down the muddy path to reach her. The closer he got, the colder the air became. When he finally stood before her, she turned her face toward him, though her eyes were clouded white. "You come to mourn the living, not the dead," she said. Kwame's voice cracked. "My son, he's gone. The river—" She raised a trembling hand, silencing him. "The river does not kill the innocent. It hides what the world is not ready to see." He frowned, confused, heart pounding. "What do you mean?" The woman smiled faintly, the kind of smile that knows secrets. "You threw him to the river. But the river caught him. It kept him, fed him, raised him. The child you lost is no longer lost." Kwame stumbled back, shaking his head. "No, that's not possible. It's been 10 years. The woman reached out and touched his forehead with a finger cold as stone. 10 years is a blink to the river. Go home, Kwame Adisa. You will see the truth when the river returns what it borrowed." And before he could speak, she stepped backward into the mist and vanished. Kwame fell to his knees, soaked and trembling, staring at the spot where she'd stood. Thunder cracked overhead, and for a second, lightning illuminated the water. He swore he saw a figure, tall, shadowed, standing in the river's reflection, looking up at him. The outline was human, but familiar. The face was his son's. He blinked, and it was gone. The wind howled across the bridge again, carrying the same whisper that had haunted him all his life. The one you love most will destroy all you've built. But now it didn't sound like a curse. It sounded like a promise. 10 years had passed since the night the river swallowed a child and buried a father's soul. The world had changed. New faces on billboards, new leaders on television, but the name, Kwame Adisa, still carried the weight of horror. Children in villages whispered his story by firelight, calling him the cursed man who threw away his own blood. Far from the cities, deep in the heart of the Oluwe forest, the river curled through the trees like a silver serpent. It had its own life, its own memory, and those who lived near it spoke of strange things. Of music at night, of footsteps on the water, of a young man who walked with the river's shadow at his back. That man was Kito. He had grown tall and lean, his skin the deep tone of rain-wet earth, his eyes bright but unearthly, as though the river still looked through them. The villagers who had found him as a baby never understood how he survived. They said the river mother had brought him ashore on a stormy night, singing in a language no one could remember. She left him wrapped in river reeds, marked with a single silver scar across his chest, shaped like a drop of water. The villagers raised him as their own, but Kito was never quite like other children. He didn't cry when hurt, didn't fear the dark, and could stay underwater longer than any boy his age. The river seemed to call his name, whispering secrets no one else could hear. By the time he was 16, he could make fish rise to the surface by humming softly. By 20, he was known across towns as the river's son. But his heart was restless. Sometimes, when the moonlight struck the water just right, he saw flashes, the image of a city far away. Glass towers, people chanting, flames rising. He didn't understand them, but they filled him with anger. Somewhere deep inside, he felt a pull, as if the world owed him something, as if someone had taken his life before it began. Then one day, the river mother appeared again. She came to him by the water's edge, her hair floating like mist. She smiled, but there was sadness in her blind eyes. "You are ready," she said. "The river has given you what you needed: strength, vision, patience. Now it asks you to return what was taken." Kito frowned. "Return what?" "Your name, your destiny, the blood that cast you away." And she told him the truth. She told him about the man who had thrown his own son from a bridge out of fear. She told him about the empire that once ruled men's lives with greed, and how that empire still poisoned the land. She told him that his blood, his own father, was still alive. Kito's heart turned cold. He remembered no father, no mother, only the sound of water and the lullaby of the river. But now he felt something else. Rage, quiet and heavy, building in his chest. "Why did he do it?" he asked. The river mother tilted her head. "Because men fear what they don't understand." He saw a vision of his own fall and chose to make it real. "And now the river has chosen you to finish what he began." Her words burned in his mind. That night, Kito packed his things, a small satchel, a charm made of river stone, and a single coin he had found in the water years ago, engraved with the initials K.A. He didn't know why, but that coin always felt familiar, almost personal. He followed the river's path for days, through villages, through cities, until its waters thinned and disappeared into pipes and drains. The closer he came to the city, the louder his heart pounded. He arrived at night. The skyline of Lagos shimmered like fireflies trapped in glass. He stood on a hill overlooking it, wind whipping through his hair. Somewhere in that glittering maze lived the man who had cast him away. His father, the once great Kwame Adisa, now a ghost among businessmen. In the streets, Kito saw the hunger of the poor, the filth, the faces of children begging at traffic lights while luxury cars passed by. It made his blood boil. The empire his father built still stood, rebuilt, crueler, feeding on the weak. He didn't know why. but he felt the river inside him stirring. Restless, angry. And then one night, he saw it. A giant banner across a new skyscraper. Adisa Corporation, reborn. The name made his hands shake. He walked closer, staring up at the building. Lightning flashed behind it, painting the sky silver. For a split second, he saw his own reflection in the glass doors. But it wasn't just his face. It was his father's, older, weary, staring back from memory. Kito whispered, "The river sent me back." And as the storm rolled across the city, a single tear of rain slid down his cheek, cold as destiny. He stepped forward into the building's shadow, his heart steady, his purpose clear. The river within him murmured one word over and over, like a prayer and a curse combined. Balance. Rain clung to the city like smoke. The streets glistened beneath neon signs, the air thick with exhaust and whispered sin. Somewhere above the noise and chaos, Kwame Adisa sat alone in his study. A man no longer feared, no longer admired, just tolerated. His company had returned from the ashes, but it wasn't the same. Investors used him like a symbol, not a leader. His hair was gray now, his voice brittle. He lived surrounded by silence and the ghosts of headlines that refused to die. Every night, he stared at the same framed photo on his desk, a picture of him holding baby Kito, taken a few days after the birth. The press had called it the promise of a new legacy. He would touch the glass with trembling fingers and whisper, "I had no choice." But deep inside, he knew that was a lie. He had a choice, and he made the wrong one. Outside, the storm raged harder. A bolt of lightning cracked across the sky, followed by thunder that shook the windows. Then the lights flickered, and just as suddenly as the power went out, a soft hum filled the air. Kwame frowned. It wasn't the hum of electricity. It was a melody. Familiar. Ancient. The same song the prophet woman had hummed before she disappeared into the mist. He rose from his chair, his chest tightening. The sound grew louder, closer, like the river itself had entered his home. He turned toward the balcony. Rain lashed against the glass, but through the blur, a shadow stood outside. Tall, still, watching him. Kwame's heart stopped. He stepped closer, squinting through the downpour. The figure didn't move, just stood there, drenched, eyes glowing faintly under the storm's light. For a second, Kwame thought it was a dream, but then the figure raised a hand and pressed something against the glass. It was a coin, old, rusted. With the initials Kea, Kwame's throat tightened. That coin, he remembered it. He had it made years ago as a token for his firstborn. He had thrown it into the river with the baby. The coin slid down the glass and clinked against the floor. When Kwame looked up again, the figure was gone. The doors burst open, wind howling inside. Water splashed across the marble floor as a young man stepped in from the storm. Barefoot, soaked, eyes burning like a storm. Kwame staggered back, speechless. For a long moment, neither spoke. The storm outside filled the silence. Then the young man whispered, "You're smaller than I remember." Kwame's voice trembled. Who are you?" The boy tilted his head. "You don't know me? You named me." It hit him like a blade. His knees weakened. He whispered, "Kito?" The young man smiled faintly, not with warmth, but with something colder. "The river remembers my name. I came to return it to you." Kwame's hands shook. "That's not possible. You can't be..." Kito took a step forward. Water dripped from his clothes onto the floor, forming small dark puddles. His eyes, the same as Kwame's once were, stared right through him. "You threw me away, Father, but the river caught me. It taught me everything you never did. It showed me your world, the one built on fear and greed, and now I understand why the river kept me alive." Kwame's voice broke. "Please, listen to me!" Kito raised his hand sharply. "No. You listened to the voice of a stranger instead of your own heart. You believed a curse more than your child. You tried to escape your fate, and in doing so, you made it real." Kwame stumbled backward, tears mixing with rain on his face. "I was trying to protect everything I built." "And you did," Kito said quietly. "You protected it from love, yes." Only thunder answered. Kito stepped closer, his presence heavy, commanding, like the river itself had taken human form. You feared that your son would destroy your empire. You were right, but not because I wanted to. His voice deepened, echoing slightly, as if another voice spoke beneath it. The voice of the river. The river doesn't destroy. It cleanses. Kwame's breath came in ragged gasps. What are you going to do to me? Kito looked at him, not with anger, but with sorrow. I'm not here to kill you, father. I'm here to let you watch what your fear created. He turned toward the window, raising his hand. Lightning flashed. And suddenly, from the streets below, the lights of the Adisa Corporation Tower began to flicker, then go dark one by one. Across the city, screens lit up with the same image, the company's logo splitting in half, replaced by a symbol of the river, 2 waves forming a circle. Kwame fell to his knees. What have you done? The river is taking back what was stolen, Kito said. Your factories that poison the earth. Your wealth that feeds no one. Your bridges built on lies. Tonight, the current will run through all of it. Kwame reached for him desperately. Kito, please. I was wrong. I was afraid. Kito looked down at him. His expression softened for the first time. Fear is the most human thing in the world, but when it owns you, it turns you into a god who forgets he's a father. Kwame grabbed his arm, tears streaming. Then tell me what to do. Tell me how to stop it. Kito leaned close, his whisper carrying the sound of rain and rushing water. You can't stop the river, father. You can only let it wash you clean. And just like that, he turned and walked out into the storm. Kwame crawled to the balcony, screaming his son's name. But the wind drowned his voice. He looked down and saw the streets flooding, not with rain but with people. Thousands carrying torches, chanting one word that shook the night. Kito! 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 The city trembled. The empire began to collapse. And somewhere in the distance, beneath the roar of the storm, the river sang. The next morning, the city woke to chaos. News channels buzzed with headlines that screamed rebellion. Adisa Corporation hacked, data leaked. Thousands marching under a new symbol. Unknown leader called the River's Son leads movement against the elites. But the real story wasn't in the headlines. It was in the streets. Everywhere, people poured out. Workers, vendors, mothers, students. They carried signs painted with waves, chanting songs that spoke of justice, balance, and the river that sees all. They said the river's son has come to cleanse the city. From his office, Kwame Adisa watched the live footage. His empire, his name, everything he had built, burning again, but this time, not by his hands. He sat motionless, the echo of his son's voice still inside his head. The river doesn't destroy. It cleanses. His board members screamed over each other. It's cyber-terrorism. We're losing billions. Call the military! But Kwame didn't move. He just stared at the screen, at the face of the young man now leading the protests. His own son, alive, grown, fierce. Kito stood on a truck surrounded by thousands, rain pouring over him, eyes shining like liquid steel. He spoke through a broken megaphone, his voice raw but powerful. They told us wealth is destiny, but destiny doesn't belong to those who hoard it. It belongs to those who earn it. The river gave life to this city, and men like Kwame Adisa poisoned it. No more! The crowd roared. Kwame's breath shuddered. He pressed his hand to his chest. It hurt to breathe. Watching Kito was like seeing the ghost of the man he once hoped to be. Brave, defiant, fearless. But behind Kito's fury, Kwame saw pain too. The kind that only comes from being broken too young. Meanwhile, far from the skyscrapers, the river mother sat by the shore, listening to the thunder of the crowd miles away. She smiled faintly. The river moves in circles, she whispered. It returns to where it began. That night, Kito's movement spread like wildfire. They called themselves the River's Children, a mix of young activists, hackers, farmers, even former employees of Adisa Corp. They didn't just protest, they built. They broke into warehouses to give away food. They hacked corporate accounts and transferred millions into hospital funds. They repaired broken pipelines in the poor districts that had been ignored for decades. Kito didn't want blood. He wanted balance, But balance rarely comes without a storm. By the third day, the government declared Kito a terrorist. Military trucks rolled into the streets. Gas bombs filled the air. People ran, screaming, but they didn't stop chanting his name. "Kito, the river's son!" Kito stood on top of an abandoned bus, shouting orders through the chaos. He tried to lead the people to safety, but soldiers cornered them near the old Nile Bridge, the same one from which his father had thrown him years ago. Lightning slashed across the sky as rain poured harder. Kito stood before the soldiers, unarmed, soaked to the bone. The bridge trembled under the weight of thousands behind him. One soldier raised his gun. "Drop your weapon!" "I have none," Kito said, raising his hands. "I didn't come to fight. I came to end the cycle." Behind the army, a convoy of black cars stopped. From the back seat of one, Kwame stepped out, clutching his coat against the wind. His eyes searched the crowd until they met Kito's. Father and son staring at each other across the same river that had once separated them. Kito's followers stepped aside, unsure what to do. The soldiers held position. The rain hammered down, soaking both men. Kwame walked slowly forward, his shoes splashing through puddles, until he stood just a few feet away. His voice was barely a whisper, but it carried through the storm. "The prophecy was right, Kito. You've destroyed everything I built." Kito shook his head. "No, father. You destroyed it yourself. I just gave the world a mirror." Kwame's lips trembled, then let the mirror show the truth. He dropped to his knees, shocking everyone. Soldiers, protesters, his own advisors. "If cleansing is what the river demands, let it take me first." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Kito froze, eyes wide. Kwame's tears mixed with rain as he looked up at his son. "I see it now. The prophecy never warned me about you. It warned me about me. I was the one who would destroy everything by fearing my own blood." He reached for Kito's hand. "If I could trade my life to give you back your childhood, I would." Kito hesitated, his throat tightening. For the first time, he saw not a tyrant, but a broken man. The storm seemed to pause, as if even the heavens were waiting. And then, from beneath the bridge, the river began to rise. Not normally, but unnaturally, waves swirling upward like something alive. The water shimmered with faint light, wrapping around the bridge's pillars. The river mother's voice echoed faintly through the rain. "The river takes what it's owed, and forgives what it must." Kito's eyes widened. The water glowed brighter. The soldiers stepped back, terrified. Kwame looked at his son one last time. "Maybe this is how I wash my soul." Before Kito could stop him, Kwame stood and stepped toward the edge, the same place he had once stood holding a baby. But this time he wasn't holding anyone else. He turned to the crowd and whispered, "Let the river end with me." He fell. The crowd screamed. Kito lunged forward, and too late. The river swallowed his father just as it had once swallowed him. But this time it didn't roar. It went still. Silent. Almost peaceful. And for the first time since his birth, Kito cried. The storm broke. The rain stopped. The sky opened with light. The city lay in stunned silence the morning after the storm. The streets were littered with debris, torn banners, broken umbrellas, puddles that reflected shattered neon lights. But something had changed. The air itself seemed lighter, as if the weight of years of greed and fear had finally begun to lift. Kito stood on the bridge where the final confrontation had taken place, staring at the river. The water swirled gently, almost reverently, holding secrets no human could understand. He knelt and touched its surface, feeling the pulse of the current as if it were alive, a heartbeat in tune with the world's rhythm. For days, he waited, listening. And then it came. A soft, hollow whisper rising from the depths, echoing against the bridge pillars. "Kwame Adisa," Kito froze. The voice was familiar, yet distant, fragile, trembling, weighted with fear and sorrow. He knelt lower, pressing his palm against the water. There, among the ripples, he saw a faint shimmer, the outline of his father, suspended between life and the river's mercy. Kwame's form was pale, weakened, almost ethereal. The river mother's voice floated across the air, faint but commanding. He is not dead, Kito. The river teaches, but it does not punish endlessly. Your father's fate is in your hands. Kito's heart wrenched. The rage that had fueled him for years bubbled up, but so did something else. Empathy, sorrow, the faint echo of the father he never knew. He closed his eyes, remembering the lullabies he had never heard, the embrace that had been stolen from him, the years of survival taught by the river. You gave me life, Kito whispered into the wind, and I will honor it. The river shimmered again, brighter this time, and Kwame's form slowly began to emerge fully. He coughed, his eyes wide, staring up at his son. Kito, his voice cracked. I saw the world through fear. I feared you would destroy me, my empire, everything I built. I thought I was protecting us. Kito's eyes filled with tears, his voice trembling. You tried to destroy me before I even had a chance to live, father. You made your fear my cage. But the river, it freed me. Kwame fell to his knees on the riverbank, his hands clasped together in desperate prayer. Can you ever forgive me? Kito looked down at him, the weight of his pain pressing against his chest. He could crush this man, reclaim vengeance, rule as the river's son, and destroy the empire for good, but he didn't. Instead, he reached out his hand. Stand, he said softly. The river teaches balance. It is not vengeance. It is redemption. Rise, father, if you can bear it. Kwame took the hand tremblingly. The river's water lapped around his feet, cool and calming, as if washing the years of sin from his soul. He rose, leaning on Kito, breathing deeply. I understand now. The prophecy wasn't about you destroying me. It was about me destroying myself, my morals, my love, my humanity, through fear. The river mother appeared beside them, silent but approving. Balance is restored, she said. But remember, the river does not forget. Those who walk with it must respect it, or they risk the tides returning to test them again. Kito nodded. I know. I've seen enough death, enough fear. The river taught me mercy, even for those who once betrayed it. Kwame looked at his son, tears streaming, face streaked with rain and guilt. I will dedicate my life to repair what I have broken. The people, the city, myself. I will not fail again. The city, unseen below the bridge, seemed to hold its breath. Slowly, as dawn broke across the skyline, light reflected on every window and street, shimmering like a promise. Kito and Kwame stood side by side, watching the river flow, understanding that some lessons are carved through pain, and some bonds are reforged in its wake. But Kito knew this was only the beginning. The river had returned his father, yes, but the legacy of greed and fear still lingered. And though one battle was won, the journey to truly cleanse the world had only just begun. The wind whispered once more. Balance is fragile. Respect it, and it may guide you. Ignore it, and it will sweep all away. Kito looked down at his father, and together they faced the river that had given life, taught wisdom, and demanded justice. For the first time, father and son were aligned, not as ruler and heir, but as custodians of the currents that bound them. A river flowing through generations, carrying the weight of both tragedy and redemption. The city had changed overnight. News feeds were still buzzing with chaos from the storm, the uprising, and the mysterious appearance of Kito, the so-called river's son. But Kito didn't wait for recognition or fame. He had seen the suffering too long ignored, the children scavenging in the streets, the factories polluting the water, the hospitals too underfunded to save the sick. The river had given him life, and now it demanded he restore balance. Kito returned to the streets with his closest allies, the river's children, a group he had begun forming secretly before the uprising. They were young and fearless, hackers, farmers, teachers, even former employees of corrupt corporations. Kito's leadership was magnetic, and the river seemed to flow through his words. Wherever he went, people followed, inspired not by fear or power, but by purpose. The first target was Adisa Corporation's abandoned industrial complex, a towering, rusting factory that had once spewed smoke across the city like a permanent shadow. Kito climbed to the roof, the rain soaking him to the bone, and spoke to the workers who had returned to the site. This city has been fed poison, exploited, ignored. Today we reclaim it, not with destruction alone, but with repair. The river teaches us. Cleansing does not come from hate. It comes from action. Under his guidance, the river's children began restoring broken pipelines, purifying contaminated water sources, and providing food and medical aid to the surrounding neighborhoods. The river's symbol, the twin waves, became a sign of hope plastered on walls, banners, and streets. People whispered in awe about the young man who seemed to command water, whose presence felt like the river itself flowing among them. Meanwhile, Kwame Adisa, now humbled and transformed, worked alongside Kito. The billionaire had become a student of the river's lessons, learning to use his knowledge and wealth to repair, not dominate. He traveled to schools, hospitals, and marketplaces, quietly supporting Kito's efforts while remaining in the shadows. The father and son rarely spoke directly in public, but their unity was undeniable. However, their movement drew the attention of old enemies, corrupt officials, rival corporations, and opportunistic politicians who had profited from the city's decay. They saw Kito not as a hero, but as a threat to everything they controlled. Threats were whispered, then delivered through intimidation. Factories were sabotaged. Media campaigns labeled him a terrorist. Kito, calm and resolute, faced them from the steps of the industrial complex, drenched in rain, his voice carrying over the assembled workers and reporters. The river teaches patience. It teaches strength. It reminds us that power belongs not to those who take it, but to those who use it for justice. You cannot destroy what the river protects. The crowd erupted. Soldiers sent to suppress them hesitated, unsure how to act against a movement so united, so pure in purpose. Even the most hardened officials felt the weight of Kito's presence, a force of nature, a living lesson in consequence and mercy. Late at night, after the day's work, Kito returned to the river's edge. He knelt, placing his hands in the water, feeling it pulse with life and memory. "Father," he whispered, "this city is ours to heal. But the path ahead is still long. The river never stops. Neither can we." Kwame joined him quietly, standing beside his son. For the first time, he did not see a threat in Kito's eyes, only resolve. Together they watched the water reflect the city skyline, shattered yet glowing, broken yet full of potential. Above them, the storm clouds parted slightly, revealing stars. The river shimmered with silver light, as if approving the balance being restored. Kito's voice, soft but unwavering, carried across the water. Every action has a consequence. Every choice shapes the future, and every life, no matter how small or abandoned, has the power to rewrite the story of the world. The city slept uneasily that night, unaware that the river's currents now pulsed through the heart of their city, guiding the actions of a son who had been lost and found, and a father who had finally learned to forgive himself. The city had never seen anything like it. Kito's movement, the river's children, had grown faster than anyone expected. Neighborhoods once abandoned and forgotten now pulsed with life. Markets reopened, schools were rebuilt, and clean water flowed where it hadn't for decades. But this surge of hope threatened the old powers. The elites who had profited from corruption and fear would not allow their empire to crumble without a fight. Late one night, Kito received a message, digital, encrypted, but unmistakable. It was from Mazio Koro, the ruthless tycoon who had controlled the city's largest energy and construction companies for years. The message was simple: stop your chaos, or the river will run red with the blood of your followers. Kito didn't panic. He read the words calmly, letting the rain outside wash the tension from his mind. The river had taught him patience, strength, and the weight of justice. He gathered the river's children on the roof of an abandoned school, the city lights glimmering below. "They believe fear can control us," Kito said, his voice cutting through the night. "But the river does not fear. It flows, it shapes, it cleanses, and so shall we." The next day, the first confrontation began. Soldiers and mercenaries sent by Mazio Koro moved through the city in black trucks, attempting to block water purification systems and food distribution centers. But Kito and his followers were ready. They moved like water themselves, flooding streets, guiding civilians to safety, dismantling traps, and exposing corrupt officials on live streams. Kito's leadership was almost supernatural. He seemed to anticipate each move, directing his team with the precision of the river's current. Yet every victory carried the weight of moral responsibility. He reminded his followers repeatedly, "We do not destroy for vengeance. We protect, we rebuild, we cleanse. Every action shapes the river of our city. Let it be guided by mercy, not hatred." Amid the chaos, Kwame worked behind the scenes. Using his knowledge of corporate systems and networks, he sabotaged Mazi Okoro's financial and communication channels, cutting off reinforcements and exposing the tycoon's corruption to the public. Father and son had become an unstoppable force, one fighting in the shadows, the other leading in plain sight. The tipping point came at the old Adisa skyscraper, where Mazi Okoro had holed up with armed guards. Kito approached cautiously, the river flowing nearby as a silent witness. Rain hammered down, lightning illuminating the city like fleeting visions of justice. Kito raised his hand, signaling his team to halt. He wanted no unnecessary deaths. "We do not fight like them," he said softly. "We show them the power of truth." With precise strategy, the river's children used drones, hacked communications, and coordinated civilian blockades to corner Okoro's forces. The tycoon, realizing he was trapped, attempted to escape through a helicopter on the roof. Kito watched as the vehicle struggled against the storm, lightning reflecting off its metal surface. He didn't interfere directly. He let the storm, the river, and the city's uprising do their work. The helicopter crashed into the river below. Okoro barely survived, dragged from the water by authorities exposed to his crimes, humiliated and powerless. The city erupted in cautious celebration. The river's children had won the first major battle against corruption without spilling unnecessary blood. But Kito knew this was only the beginning. For every tyrant defeated, another would rise, and every choice, no matter how righteous, carried consequences. That night, Kito returned to the riverbank, watching the waters swirl and glint beneath the moonlight. Kwame joined him silently, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. "You've grown into more than I ever imagined," Kwame whispered. "The river flows through you, not just in blood, but in spirit." Kito's eyes glimmered with both pride and warning. "The river will guide us, Father. But the world is still full of those who fear it. And fear is far more dangerous than any enemy we've faced so far." The wind carried their words across the city, rustling through rooftops and empty streets. Somewhere downstream, the river whispered back, affirming their path, yet reminding them, justice is never final, only a moment in the current of time. The city held its breath. Months of rebuilding, cleansing, and moral leadership by Kito had shifted the balance of power. But the remnants of the old elite were not gone. They were gathering, desperate and dangerous. At the center of it all was Senator Adewale, a cunning politician who had thrived under corruption and feared nothing, except the rise of the river's children. Kito knew the time had come for the final confrontation. Intelligence gathered by his allies revealed Adewale's hidden stronghold, an abandoned dam complex on the outskirts of the city. Soldiers, mercenaries, and enforcers loyal to the senator had fortified the area. Every approach was monitored, every exit blocked. It was a fortress of fear, built to withstand any force but the truth. Standing with Kwame and the river's children atop a ridge overlooking the complex, Kito surveyed the situation. Rain had begun again, light at first, then heavier, as though the river itself anticipated the battle. "This is more than a fight," Kito said. "It's a reckoning. They believe power is in weapons, in wealth, in fear. We know it's in balance, in justice, in courage." Kwame nodded, the weight of years reflected in his eyes. "I've faced them before, son, but you carry the river in your veins. Let it guide you." As night fell, Kito led a calculated assault, using misdirection, synchronized hacking of security systems, and the civilians they had inspired to create diversions. The river's children infiltrated the compound. The river's waters had risen naturally nearby, allowing secret channels and underground passageways to become pathways to the heart of the fortress. Inside, Kito confronted Senator Adewale. The man was taller, older, but his eyes revealed fear. The first time in decades someone had stared back at him without submission. "You think you are the river?" Adewale sneered. "You are just a boy playing at justice." Kito's gaze was calm, almost otherworldly. "The river flows through all of us, Adewale. Even you. But it does not bend to cruelty. Tonight, it takes only what is owed." The battle was as much psychological as physical. Adewale attempted to manipulate Kito, reminding him of the past, the injustice of poverty, the corruption of those who had suffered. But Kito had grown under the river's tutelage. His heart was tempered by compassion and clarity. Every strike he made was precise, not to kill, but to disable and expose. Meanwhile, Kwame worked to dismantle Adewale's financial empire from the inside. His knowledge of accounting, security, and legal loopholes allowed Kito's movement to neutralize resources, isolating Adewale's forces. Father and son worked in perfect harmony, one leading the people, the other controlling the infrastructure. The final confrontation came on the dam itself. Adewale cornered Kito at the precipice, rain lashing, river roaring below. "If you take me down, the city will fall into chaos," Adewale shouted, clutching a weapon. Kito's eyes glimmered like the water beneath them. "Chaos already exists. I'm here to bring balance." The weapon clattered to the ground, disarmed not by force, but by Kito's unwavering presence. Adewale's men, seeing their leader's fear and powerless stance, surrendered one by one. The senator fell to his knees, rain streaming down his face, a broken man before the force of justice. Kito extended his hand to Adewale. "It doesn't end with destruction. Change comes from understanding, from rebuilding, from mercy." Adewale hesitated, then took it, trembling. Kito's victory was complete, not through death, but through moral authority, the river's wisdom, and the courage of thousands who followed him. The river surged beneath them as if celebrating the end of the battle. Kwame stood beside Kito, pride and relief mingling with tears. "You've done more than I ever imagined," he whispered. "You've restored the city, restored hope, and even restored me." Kito looked down at the waters, his reflection merging with the river's flow. Balance is restored, but the river never stops. Its lessons are ongoing, for every soul that lives here. As dawn broke, the city below slowly awoke to a new era, one shaped by courage, redemption, and the river's eternal guidance. The city breathed differently now. Sunlight glimmered on buildings once dull with grime. Streets smelled of fresh rain and cleaned water, and children played where garbage had once piled. Kito stood on the riverbank, watching the waters flow peacefully. The river had taught him everything: patience, strength, mercy, and the power of balance. Kwame Adisa stood beside him, older, humbled, and finally free from the fear that had once controlled him. Together, father and son had not only defeated the corrupt, but had restored hope to a city that had been broken by greed. "I never imagined it could be like this," Kwame whispered. "The city, the people, they've changed." Kito smiled faintly, his eyes reflecting the river's light. "The city was always capable of change, Father. It just needed someone to remind it of balance, and someone to follow the river's guidance." The river's children moved through the city, helping communities rebuild, teaching young people how to maintain systems fairly, and ensuring resources were distributed to those who needed them most. Their movement had become more than rebellion. It had become a philosophy, one that encouraged responsibility, courage, and empathy. Kito looked down at the river's edge, his reflection rippling with the water. The lessons of the river had been harsh but necessary. Fear, greed, and pride could destroy anyone, but forgiveness, understanding, and action could restore everything. Kwame placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "I see now why the river spared you, why it gave me a second chance. It was never about punishing or destroying. It was about teaching us how to live and how to care." A gentle breeze whispered across the water, carrying the soft hum of the river, a song of life, renewal, and hope. Kito nodded, feeling a sense of completeness, yet aware that life would continue to challenge them. The river would always flow, testing those who sought power, demanding balance, and rewarding those who acted with compassion. "We are the river stewards now," Kito said softly. Not rulers, not judges, but guides. Its current will flow through every decision we make, reminding us to protect, not exploit. To give, not take. To heal, not destroy. Kwame looked out at the city, the river glinting in the morning light. Then let's make sure the river always remembers our hands, not to harm, but to build. For the first time in years, father and son smiled, not with pride, but with understanding. They had survived tragedy, guilt, and fear, and they had emerged stronger, wiser, and united. The river had taken what was owed, but it had also returned what mattered most: hope, life, and the chance to start again. The city thrived. The river's children became a lasting movement, a symbol of justice and balance, and high above, the bridge where the story began stood silent, a reminder that even the deepest wounds could lead to redemption if one listened to the flow of life. The river's eternal lesson. Moral of the story: true power is not in domination, fear, or wealth. It lies in mercy, responsibility, and the courage to make right what was once wrong. Life, like the river, flows onward, and those who respect its current can restore balance to the world.